Welcome to Read This, Author's Corner. I am your host, Alice Maria, and today I have the pleasure of speaking with award-winning author Kwame McPherson, the author of My Date with Depression. Welcome, Kwame. Welcome, Kwame. It's so great to have you. I'm so excited to talk to you about your book, but you're a poet, you're a novelist, you're like a man of many written talents.
Apparently.
But before we jump into your book, would you mind telling the audience a little bit about yourself?
Oh, wow. What can I say? Kwame McPherson, been writing majority of my life, but didn't realize how profound it would be later on in terms of being a career. I'm an award-winning writer internationally. What else? I do mentoring. I help other people. I'm a book coach. I help other people write. I'm a ghostwriter. Also, there's many strings to my bow. So anytime someone asks me that question, I can go down any route. So it's always difficult to try and have something concise to say, because it's vast. Literally, it's vast.
Well, I get that, and I really appreciate people that are multi-talented people, because I myself suffer from the same condition. And I guess that might be part of just being Jamaican anyway.
Yes, it is actually. It is.
So, but because a lot of times people are like, oh, you're doing too much.
I know, right?
Choose something. And I'm like, all of these things make up me.
Exactly.
And my right hand is just as important as my left, and my right eye is just as important as my left eye. So how do you choose?
Exactly.
So I get where you're coming from.
Yeah. If you ask me something specific, then I can answer it specifically. You know what I mean? Yeah. So I can. But when you're talking in general terms, it's so vast. Yeah, it's hard to pin down. Hard to drill down.
I hear you. I'm with you. I feel your pain. Feel your pain. But today we're going to take a deep dive into my date with depression, because men's mental health is such an important topic and something that gets kind of skated over, like, you guys don't have problems.
Exactly.
Until until something extreme happens, and then it's like, oh yeah, he had a problem.
Yeah.
So I'm just curious, what motivated you to write this journey? Because quite often that's kind of personal, and people keep it to themselves. So what motivated you? We'll talk about the journey, but I really want to know what motivated you to share the journey.
Okay, well, it's some time ago. I was writing, and I write a lot of. Well, I did a lot of poetry initially when I started writing out my writing journey, and then after a while, I transitioned into writing prose in terms of writing short stories, that kind of stuff. And I did I have a couple of compilations of short stories that I've done. But I realized when I was looking at the stories that I had written, I hadn't written anything about myself. There's a couple of short stories which touch on my personal life that I've done, but I hadn't written anything that is a long piece or a longer something that captures my journey, especially pivotal times in my journey. So the book came about by me just reflecting. I said, you know what? That was a period of my life where a lot happened. A lot of people were affected by it. When I was in that space, and what I went through in terms of that experience. So I just decided to write something personal about myself rather than something that is, ad hoc or not a random in terms of
something
what I normally write. Yeah, so I decided to write something that captured a part of my journey, and that's how it came about. So it was written in 2015. I wrote it, and I lost the manuscript. I had a USB that got corrupted, a thumb drive. And funny enough, it was in 2019 that I was looking through Facebook, and I realized I had sent the manuscript to a friend of mine. And that's how I was able to get it back, really. So I was able to download it. And I said, no, I'm still have it. And I said, now's the time to publish it. And that's when it actually came out, 2019. but I had actually lost the script,
Well, it wasn't the right time, right?
Exactly.
Is
Exactly.
sometimes we think when we do something, that's when it's supposed to happen,
That's right.
but when it's really supposed to happen, it happens in a way that you don't even see it.
Yeah.
You don't see it coming.
That's right. Just go along with the flow. And so when I said, I got it back. I said, no, the time to publish it. And that's exactly what I did.
Excellent. And then, well, I'm going to take us in. I picked out about 4 chapters in the book
Okay.
that we can kind of just give people an idea of what the
Yeah.
book is about and your mindset when you were creating these things. So we're going to start with introducing them to you first off, because it says the explorer in me.
Right. Exploring in me. That was where I was I was trying to find myself, really. I was trying to find answer to what I was going through. Because my depression was brought on by external circumstances. It was by my mismanagement of money, and then basically trying to, even though looking at it positively now, it was me investing. I did a lot of investing using other people's money, and then basically lost it. And then it was a matter of trying to not take responsibility for what I was going through. So everything that was happening, well, even though it was external, I had internalized it. And I then, as men, we don't tend to talk about, what we're going through. We don't share. We don't seek solutions, actually. We try to solve the problems ourselves. And that's exactly what happened with me. So, so I had migrated from the UK to Canada. And Canada at the time was, supporting small business entrepreneurs and that kind of stuff. And that's how I was able to get into a lot of money. And like I said, I mismanaged it and ended up internalizing the stress, and then seeing what a lot of people tend to do when you're in a state of depression is that I isolated myself, and basically didn't open up. I isolated myself, went on random walks. Ended up taking abnormal actions as my cousin would. She was the one who helped to identify what I was going through. But that's how it actually began, and so the exploring is me when it actually began, because I had transitioned from the UK to Canada, and then what had happened whilst I was living in Canada at the time, and trying to decipher my purpose in life.
So is that why there's a chapter that's called "Life Sucks"?
Yeah. So it's and again, it was trying to find. It was trying to because what I ended up doing was questioning myself as an African Caribbean man, and that meant exploring my history. That meant understanding who I was and why I was here, really. And that's where a lot of the trials and tribulations came when I had invested and I had started saying, oh man, it's threw my hand up in the air and it was and also at that time is where other people are being affected by my journey, negatively, because like I said, I wasn't opening up, I wasn't being vulnerable. And being able to explain the situation that I was going through and what I was in. And then it also, and when you're in that space, and when I was in that space, it brought up a lot of other stuff, So for example, it brought up stuff of what had happened to my parents when I was a child, because my father was violent to my mother. So there was abuse in that sense. And the trauma of splitting up, that trauma I took with me as a young child. When my father took me and my brother away from our mother, and she didn't know where we were, and we had, basically left one country and gone to another one, and that I didn't realize the impact of that until I was going through what I was going through in terms of the depression, and it came back, it came to the fore, and then it's a matter of just trying to adapt, really, and understanding that things that had happened in my childhood also impacted in my adulthood.
Yeah, and sometimes we don't give ourselves grace especially as people of color. Sometimes when it comes to that money issue, because you go from a lot of times not having a lot.
Mm.
And then you get this lot, but on the same token, who taught us really how to manage a
That's right.
checkbook? Who taught
That's right.
us how to do all of these things that is kind of necessary to progress, to actually use money wisely and invest it correctly? It's kind of a trial and error,
Yeah.
depending on how young you are when you get a lot of it.
Yeah, exactly. And it's when I've come to realize that it's an energy, so it's just a tool, but that tool is so embedded in terms of everything that moves. It's something. It's just an energy, and when you're in a particular space, it will come as that energy, and if the energy that you have at that time in that space is what's going to come, it's going to come out. And I mean, if that makes sense, and that's what I began to realize, that all it was just a tool, but I was in a particular space, and that tool just basically, it was aligned with me, or it was something that was an extension of myself, and that's what came out. Because of that tool, because I was in that space. If I was in a different space, say for example, if I was in an upliftment space or a space of positivity and striving and getting ahead, then the outcome would have been different, but because it's just a tool, it's just an energy. That's what I began to realize. Well, later on reflection, it was just a tool to bring out what was already there,
They always say your biggest lessons are in what is quote unquote failure, which I really don't believe in failure.
No, me neither.
I believe that everything that we go through teaches us something else, teaches us that we're resilient, teaches us that we're strong and intelligent, and that we could find our way out of a paper bag buried 6 feet under if we need to. When you're going through it, it's just like, but just when you get to the other side and you go, oh my goodness, what did I gain from this experience?
Exactly.
Sometimes the stuff that you gain from the experience is powerful.
It is. Well, exactly, because I think that the experiences that we do have, especially when we're in a particular in a negative space, it's almost like, as they say, the universe, you get slapped. I mean, if you're in a particular space, you get slapped. And if you don't take heed or become aware of the reasons why things are happening, you get slapped harder. And if you still don't underway, then you get slapped even harder. So the slaps will get hotter and harder, until you get the lesson and say, this is the reason why you're in a particular space or what's happening,
Or people just give up and not try. They shrink into and go. I remember growing up, and I had a couple of relatives that were always talking about, so bad lucky, But on the other hand, my father would say, Christ have never had it easy. What makes you think you're special? You should expect some bad luck,
So you take it in and how you process it and deal with it, right?
Right. You don't get your crops without the sun, and sometimes that sun can be really hot, but all of those things are required to grow the crops. And I look at life through the lens of nature. And so you move from life sucks to learning how to love life every day.
Yeah, I had to go through particular experiences, one of which was that funny enough, it was for me. It was my journey. I had to go to Africa in order to repair or begin the relearning, and that helped. Prior to that, I began to read about Black history, African history, and that in a way, because like I said, the questions I was asking myself is, who am I as an African Caribbean man? So I was fortunate enough to end up going to a bookstore in Brampton called Knowledge Bookstore. And it's there I started to relearn what it meant to be an African Caribbean man. And through that process, the girlfriend that I had at the time, she said, let's go to Africa. I said, you're now on that journey, And the first time I went to Africa, I went to Ghana. And that was where the transition began for me in terms of understanding who I am as an African Caribbean man and the history behind that journey, my journey. And it was in that space where I was able to come to terms with being an African Caribbean man, because I began to I added the dots together. I added together that I was in a space where I had to come before the ancestors, and I couldn't come with any labels or any accolades or all that kind of stuff or whatever it is I had thought I had achieved in terms of materialism or not as materialism, but in terms of names, whatever you want to call it, degrees, all that kind of stuff. All those things didn't matter because when I was presented before the ancestors, I literally had to be naked, if that makes sense. I had to be. Some people say, if you believe in the Christian faith and stuff like that, they talk about being reborn, and in that space, in that time, I had to be in front of the ancestors because I had the opportunity to go to Cape Coast, which is one of the enslavement forts. And in the dungeon, you can't be anything else but yourself. You know what I mean? You can't be anything else but an African. You know what I mean? Whether you're from the Caribbean or from America or wherever else. You can't be anything else but. And that time and that space, I had to be vulnerable. I had to be open. I had to be true to myself because I was now in front of the ancestors, and I had to understand in terms of my own liberty, understand that what they went through was 10 times worse than what I was going through. And so when I was able to make that comparison and understand the significance of it all, then I started to have a relearning and rehealing process, or healing process. But that was where that's where the vulnerability came, because I had to be, like I said, naked. Can't go with all the accolades and all that stuff didn't matter.
No, the degrees don't matter, right?
No, it don't matter. It don't matter.
So in that kind of space, what does learning to love life every day look like for you?
Just being grateful. You know what I mean? Being grateful for being here, being grateful for the purpose that I have in terms of my writing, which I love, and being able to share stories because I love storytelling. Fulfilling my purpose in life, and that's basically it. Every morning I get up, I'm grateful. Every morning I get up, I'm grateful. I'm grateful that I'm able to continue to do the works that I was put here to do. It's nothing more than that. There's nothing more than that. And I'm living my best life because of it.
And you said there are 8. You have an 8-step guide to repairing your life.
Yeah.
Can you give us a little bit about what that's about, and maybe a couple of the steps that you...
Yeah, well, the first step in terms of... One of the things I realized in terms of capturing my story was being able to write or to journal. I advise anyone that especially if you're going through parts of experiences, or even if you just want to write about your life story, having a journal is great. You don't have to write it every day, but it's a way of capturing where you're at, a particular time, a particular space. That's one thing. I would also say reading is also important. Reading, not just reading books that we're taught about, but try to read outside of that. Try to read everything. I try to consume everything I can in terms of reading. Understanding about world history, understanding about, our journey as African people, understanding about the system that operate to this day. All those kind of things because I'm a writer, but it's great to understand all those kind of things in order to understand your place within it. That's one thing I would say. Another great thing I would say about talking, having the ability to open up, to talk to someone else. So, for example, I've been on a number of talks, and I remember the first talk that I did when I had completed my book. I remember I was invited to a seminar, and whilst I was talking about my journey, at the end, a young lady came on behalf of her partner, and she introduced me to her partner because she was saying that she was having trouble trying to connect or to engage with him. And I said, that's okay, but allow him to engage with another man. And she introduced me to him, and in the end, we had a great discussion, and he was starting to see from, his own perspective on how he could be vulnerable and don't feel ashamed by it, Mm-hmm. That's what I will say. Talking is a great way, but talking to people who can uplift. And for men in particular, we don't tend to talk to the persons who are closest to us. We tend to talk, especially if it's a female partner in that sense. We tend to talk to, we don't talk to them at all until they're opening up, majority of the time. So it's good to find someone who can bring that balance in outside of that. So then that individual can then learn on how to open up. Without feeling, like I said, without feeling weak or without feeling ashamed of doing so. Another thing I would always add is being still. I had the opportunity to be still, being able to reflect, being able to see where I'm at in terms of my life journey, being thankful for it because, like I said, bearing in mind that many people pass every day, So I'm being thankful for where I am at any particular point in time. And being still enables that. So it's a matter of finding somewhere where that can happen, because for me, one thing I found, which was difficult, was finding that space. Finding that space. Aside from when I went to the bookstore, where I was able to be still and to read, it's about, being out in nature and taking a walk and stuff like that. And I don't like the cold. So I'm always inside. So the four walls are basically like a prison itself. So in the end, I found somewhere where I can actually be still, I can be free in terms of my own mind and what I want to create and so on and so forth. So that's what I would also say. And it's also about taking responsibility. One of the things I learned is to take responsibility for where I was at, for what I went through, where I am now and where I'm heading. So it's taking 100% responsibility. And not asperging blame, not saying that, there's anyone to blame. It's my life. I have to take control of it and I have to direct it the best way I can. So it's about taking responsibility and for what's happened and the things I've done to others and forgiving myself for because at that particular time, that particular space, there probably would have been things that I reacted to because I didn't know any better. And just taking responsibility for that. So that's something I would also share. And it is about just being patient, with oneself, just being patient. And I think we can dream of a better tomorrow, and not, like I said, and not blaming or, stressing yourself out about whatever happened. It's just a matter of understanding where you're at that time. If you need to say, have an apology to yourself or apologize to somebody else, do so. But it's just about your life journey and being able to find that peace and no stress, So I tend not to live with any stress. I ain't got no time for that stress.
Well, stress is usually formed through a lot of worry, right?
Yeah.
And I tell people, my dad's gone now, but I was a daddy's girl, not to the bone, but to the marrow, and and he used to say that only thing that worry does is make the doctors rich, right? So, so I have learned how to manage worry because worry is the seed that produces stress.
Yep.
So I find quite often when my mind starts talking about something over and over again, I'm like, wait a minute, hold on. Do you have any new information for me? I mean, we had this discussion already. And if we don't have any new information, why are we still talking about it? I always say, I'm thankful for my dad, who won because his outlook on life, he was positive. He was positive and strong, and think that he came here to the United States in the 40s to work in the tobacco fields. And the things that he shared that he encountered is not as hard as it could be.
Exactly. I think, and that's in a sense, it's a privilege to be able to live where I live or where we live, and because there are others who don't have this privilege,
Exactly. And as we're wrapping up, what is it that you would like the audience to take away from meeting you?
But for men in particular, I don't know, it's okay to be vulnerable. It's okay to be emotive. It's okay to be open up. It's okay because, in a sense, when you open up, that's when you're strongest. It's when you close, that's when you're weakest. So it's okay. You don't need permission to do that. It's just a matter of understanding that you have feelings. You're a human being, and that if you're hurting or you're stressed out, you can say. You won't. And even if someone is trying to persecute you for it, that's okay too. That's not down to you. That's down to them. So I would say to men is that always have an opportunity to open up. Always have an opportunity to ask for help. Because one of the things which is in my book is there's one stage where I needed to ask an ex-girlfriend for help because I knew I was going through some stuff. I knew it was stuff from the past, but I didn't know how to deal with it. And I asked her for help, and she was the one who referred me to counseling. So it's okay to ask for help, So those are the things that I would say in regards to what comes out and why I wrote what I wrote and my book. And on the other hand, I would also say to women is that if a man is not opening up, that's okay too. Just try to find somebody he can look up to or has respect for, and try to get them to help you in a particular situation, and allow the man to have a discussion and to open up to them, because when a man clams up, trying to force him to speak is one of the worst things you can try and do.
Dig his heels in.
Yeah, it's going to dig his heels in. It's going to go into his cave. It's not going to come out until it's ready. It's going to be defensive. It's a lot of those things. It's going to have a wall up. So when a man's in that space, especially if a man who's on a particular journey and is aware that it's going to be in that space, he'll come out eventually and say, "Boy, this is what's affecting him." But don't try and force him, because that will just have a backlash. So be patient with men in that regard, but also try to see. If you are having difficulty communicating on that level, then try to seek a source or a resource or someone who can actually support him opening up to them, and enabling the two of you to have better communication. So those are the things I would say in regards to my book and what people can take away, and what I would share. But yeah, my book. I think I was told that my book is groundbreaking, which when I wrote it back then, I didn't think about it being groundbreaking. I was wrote a book.
Well, I think I could see where when you wrote it probably wouldn't have had the same impact as it does now.
Yeah.
Because there is a space for it now.
Yeah. COVID had kicked in when COVID happened. I remember talking to a friend of mine. I said, you know what? I cheated, because I've been through it, because a lot of people went through it and came out of COVID with depression, right? I said, because I wrote about my particular experience at that time. So I said, my book was preempted COVID in a sense, in that regard. So you're right, there's a space for it now. So it's written at the time it was, but there's definitely a space for it now.
Right. It would have been, had you been able to publish then, it would seem like an old book for a new problem.
Exactly.
But because you published it when the problem actually started manifesting itself, and people are stepping up and saying, this is what I'm going through, although it was 10 years ago for you that you wrote it, but it's timely because of what has happened. So everything in due time, everything in due season.
Everything
in due season. Well, it's been wonderful talking to you. But before we wrap up, what are you working on now? What would you like to share?
What am I working on now? What I'm not working on now, I'm working on a few novels actually. Because I'm doing more creative writing in that sense. I won an award 2 years ago for the Commonwealth Short Story Prize, International Writers Prize, the first Jamaican to win that prize. And I'm now in the process of writing a novel for that short story. There's a lot of writing. I'm doing a ghostwriting project too, actually, for mentoring of young girls in Ghana project that took place, and I'm doing a book for that. So there's a lot of writing.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for taking time from your writing to speak to me about your writing.
Thank you for having me.
It was a pleasure. It was really great talking to you. And thank you for creating this very important, timely work and being brave enough to put it out there into the world. So
thank you.
We thank you for doing that.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah. I would like to thank my special guest, Kwame McPherson, for being with me today to discuss his book, My Date with Depression. Please go out and pick up a copy and follow Kwame for all the great work that he's doing. This has been Read This, Author's Corner. I am your host, Alice Maria. Keep reading, keep growing, and stay empowered.